Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to begin the funeral service of Kenneth Allen Freedman, DDS. Those of you who are joining us via live stream, we welcome you. Those of you here, please take a moment to be sure your cell phones have been turned off. Hopefully you're feeling the benefits of the gentlemen that are on the roof working on the air conditioning, so it is, believe it or not, cooler than it was 20 minutes ago. At this time, we are humbled and honored to have representatives from the United States military to perform honor guard for Dr. Freedman. So please focus your attention on the honor guard. We thank the representatives from the United States Army, also the bugler. This time, Rabbi Leonard Matanki will be officiating. Just as a last and gentle reminder, please be sure your phones are off.
The 23rd Psalm, Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, binodesha yarbitzeni al mei menuchot yanahaleni, nafshi yeshovev yanacheni b'magle tzedek leman shemo, gam ki elech beged salmavet, lo irara ki ata imadi, shiftecha umishantecha hema yanachamuni, ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorerai, Dishanta v'Hashemen roshi kosi revaya, achtov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai li'orech yamim. On the inside of your folder, if you'd please join with me in English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I've known Kenny Freedman my entire life. He was a cousin, and while they lived in the far south suburbs, in Flossmoor to be precise, my siblings and I grew up with him, with his wife, our cousin Arlene, and their kids, Michael and Lauren and Ruth Ann. And so a few weeks ago, when I received an email from Ruth Ann telling me that she was in Africa, apparently a common place for the Freedmans to be, and asking if I could go visit her dad, it wasn't a big ask. It was just something you do for a cousin. I checked with Michael to see if his dad was up for visitors, and I went over to the hospital. Kenny was on the cardiac floor, and I really didn't know in what shape I would find him. So I knocked on the door, called out his name, and I said, "It's Lenny Matanki." And then I walked over to his bedside. He looked up at me, and with a sly smile, he said, as only Kenny could, "What the hell are you doing here, kid?" Hearing those words and seeing that smile, I was sure he'd be okay. Returned to being Cousin Kenny, the fun-loving, kibitzing, trailblazing dentist, the cousin we all knew and loved. For about a half hour, we spoke mostly about family. He told me where everyone was and the nachas he was getting from his grandchildren. He filled me in about Arlene and her challenges, and he asked me about my kids. He joked about some of the tubes and the wires he was connected to. And then he told me about the chavurah that he had established at the Carrington and the services he and others were leading. When it was time to go, I wished him well. And as I left, I felt so grateful to Ruth Ann for having reached out, given me the opportunity to see her dad, whom I was sure I would see again. But last week, as our family was sitting Shiva for our mom, I found out that I was wrong and that we lost yet another pillar of our family, which brings us to today, to this moment of farewell to a beloved husband, father, grandfather, brother, brother-in-law, son, Dr. Kenneth Freedman, Kalman ben Yehuda V'Dvora of blessed memory. I'll leave many of the remembrances to Michael and Lauren and Ruth, as well as to his grandchildren, Ryan, Jordan, Connor, Rachel, Hannah, and Ren, who'll be speaking in just a few moments. But there are a few items I do want to share. The first is that growing up, and despite the geographical distance, Kenny and Arlene were a constant fixture in our lives. They made it their business to be at every simcha and event, to be part of our lives and us part of theirs, because family was so very important to them. They learned it from their parents, and they passed it on to their children. Growing up, Kenny's home was filled with Jewish tradition. He could use a Yiddish phrase with the best of them. And he bought all of his grandchildren their talesim. And he was a leader in the Jewish community of the South Suburbs, serving as president of their shul and being involved in the J and so many other causes. He and Arlene were part of our family yichus. She is the national president of Hadassah, and he is the pioneering geriatric dentist, a professor of prosthodontics, I think I said it right, at the University of Illinois, who created a postdoctoral program in geriatric dentistry, and who not only owned a dental van so he could see patients where they were, but he owned a DeLorean. In fact, I still remember when we visited them in Flossmoor and the car was parked in the driveway in front of the house. We were in awe. After all, it was around the time of the first Back to the Future movie, and his DeLorean had a starring role. And I decided to do something very special. I put my thumbprint right on the side of the car. Let's just say that it was one of those times when Kenny's big smile was not in place. But what I remember most of all about Kenny was his presence. His joy was contagious, his love unwavering, and his care for everyone boundless. He was that unique sort of person who, when we were with him, you just felt more because of him. One last note, growing up, whenever we referred to Kenny, it was always Kenny and Arlene. They were a team. They complemented each other. They loved each other, and they cared for each other, creating this amazing family. And as Arlene's memory declined, Kenny continued to care for her until he could no longer, and he had to have her transferred to a memory unit. He talked to me about this as well when I visited him in the hospital. And while it was clear how painful it was, he said he was so grateful for all the years they had together in good health, the trips and the things they did together, and he said he accepted what had happened, which is what I pray that all of you do as well, accept that this amazing man who was full of life, while no longer part of this world, is still part of who his family has become, so that the memory of his kindness and his love remain with all of you and inspire you forever, which is, by the way, the meaning of the classic Jewish prayer passed on for those who have passed on, the words, Tehei nafsho tzrura b'tzrura chayim, may his soul be bound up in the bonds of the living. Because when a person lives a life of meaning, when he or she loves others with all their heart, gives of themselves for the betterment of others, and shares the joy and opportunities God has given them with the people they care for, a piece of their life, their soul, remains forever in the soul of those they loved. And that was Dr. Kenneth Freedman. May you remain close to one another. Find comfort in the stories you'll share, and keep the memory of your father and grandfather alive by embracing his values, his loves, and his passions, family, community, and the Jewish people. And now it's my honor to call upon his children, beginning with Michael, then Lauren, then Ruth, then Ryan, Jordan, Connor, Rachel, Hannah, and Ren, to share their thoughts with all of us.
Thank you all for coming today. While it's a sad day when someone you love so much passes, it's very important to remember and celebrate a life well lived. This is not part of my eulogy, but I know when people look for signs about when someone's passed, I'm not a big believer of that. I've never thought about that, but as we were driving here to the funeral home, we looked out to the left side of our vehicle, and there was, you wouldn't believe it, there was a DeLorean driving right next to us. And that, it was just like, I cannot believe what I'm seeing. Or we said, it shouldn't be me, but we all said the same thing. And that, was an unbelievable sign, which, I'll always remember. So you just, the odds of seeing that happening were just, so it had to be karma. So anyway, that's how my dad wanted to be remembered for. His family, his kids, his grandchildren, grandpa, as everybody called him. He's a leader and a friend to so many. He can relate to people and just start up a conversation with everyone. Even people, at the Carrington where he's at are streaming as we speak. So say hey to everybody. You'll get to hear from other people close to him in the next few minutes. Sadly, our mom is not here today, but I know my dad loved her very much. And they were together for almost 72 years. Not quite, a little older than me, just to be sure. And he would visit her regularly in memory care and hold her hand, and they loved to listen to music together. So I'd like to share a few personal memories. So my earliest days with my dad were living on the South Side in South Shore on Crandon Avenue. He loved the neighborhood, and he and my mom, he had so many friends that, these relationships lasted, he's one of probably the last people to be alive, but it lasted for many, many years. One of my other memories was my dad was president of our temple in Rodfei Sholom on the South Side, and as the oldest, he was probably the most strict with me. But, I had a bit of a wild side from time to time. And one day I thought, so as president, I thought I could get away with stuff. So one day in Hebrew school, I was sitting there, and for those who know me well, I love pinball. And I had a little plastic pinball machine that I was playing under the desk. And the principal came in and said, "What are you doing?" And I might have said something a little snarky. And the next thing I knew, I was suspended from Hebrew school. So my dad was a little embarrassed. He was not too happy, and I had thought up until that moment that corporal punishment was banned, but apparently in my dad's case it was not. So I did learn a little bit of a valuable lesson as to how far I could push it. Dad loved to take us out to dinner. On the South Side, one of the two favorite places were a place called Rib Hill on Jeffrey Avenue, and another place called Warchall, neither of which are no longer here in Chinatown. I always thought growing up that ribs were kosher food. I had no idea until I was about 10 or 11. So Dad loved watching sporting events. We had seasons tickets to the Blackhawks in the late 60s when there were 6 teams in the league. So we got to see them play in the stadium. We got to go to Bulls games and a lot of White Sox games, although I didn't know my dad was actually a Cub fan until much later in life. We took so many trips as kids. It was a family adventure every year. We went to World's Fair, an expo, national parks, hiking, and a mobile home trip. I love to take road trips, and I attribute that to my dad. We spent a lot of time, and I've done road trips all through the country, and sometimes to my wife, Kathy's consternation, I want to do those road trips overseas. So I like to just go driving, even though I have no idea where I'm going. And finally, I think the longest trip we ever took was driving from Chicago to Acapulco. You know, that was like 32 hours of driving one way with my dad, but it was quite a trip. When I was a kid, one of my favorite, and then, you know, I should leave out lots of trips to Vail, although I think my siblings will talk more about that. My favorite trip with my dad, one-on-one, was when I was 15, and we went down the Colorado River on a raft, just camping. It was him and my uncle Carole. So I'd say it was my first boys trip. So, you know, for those of you, we've all been 15 and you are like embarrassed about what your parents do when they're around. And, you know, my dad and my uncle, it was like they were crazy out there. They just did whatever they wanted to do, smoked cigars, you know, just had a great time, embarrassed me. You know, I think it was probably because there were a couple of girls my age that I was maybe trying to impress, and that was not helping at all. But we had a great time. It was wonderful 7 days down the river through the Grand Canyon, and then on to Las Vegas. And again, it's kind of the continuation of my pinball. My dad gave me about $10 worth of quarters, and he said, "We're going to the casino and see you later," and just left me there. But it was a wonderful memory, and as you got older, you know, you remember more about the whole trip, less about your personal embarrassment of being 15 years old. I was proud to follow my dad's footsteps, go to the University of Illinois. Did not want to be a dentist, but it was fun to hear about my dad's time there, and we got to enjoy some basketball and football games there together. Team kind of stunk, but it was still a good experience. Dad was a dentist for 60 years. He loved his patients. He's proud of, I think one of his proudful moments was he took care of multi-generational patients. He used to talk about it. Some of my patients are third generation in his practice. And he was very proud of that. And I think most people were totally surprised when he'd say every once in a while how old he was, because he always looked a lot younger than he really was. As a CPA, I kept his books and did his tax returns, so, you know, over 35 years. And, you know, that was a part of our relationship. Maybe it was transactional, but, you know, to the extent, but we loved talking about finance together in there. So it's kind of more of a business. It was often a business and financial relationship, even just up to the time that he's passed away. My dad loved so many people. Wherever he went, people would say he was a great guy. I know that many of you have fond memories of Dad. That's his legacy. That's the guy he was. When he got sick at the end of May and was back in the ER in the ICU at St. Francis, one nurse in the ER came up to me and said, you know, he had been there a few times, so they knew him. He says, "What a great guy your dad was. He was really nice and kind and had a good sense of humor for what he's going through." And then when he was up in the ICU in St. Francis, another nurse came back and says, "Your dad was a really great guy." So it was really, it kind of summed up his whole life. So father, grandfather, friend, leader, and teacher. I imagine my dad is sitting up in heaven smoking a Macanudo with his best friend, Sanford J. Brown. Thank you.
You stole a few of my lines. I don't like that, no. Dad, I remember submitting your name for Father of the Year when I was in grade school, and you didn't win. I was really disappointed. Now I know why. It's because you won Father of the Century. You nailed it. You were perfectly cast for the role of the best dad in the world. I wanted to share a few things that I remember that exemplify your spirit and your soul. Your "it will all work out" mentality. He used to tell me, I remember when we first started private school, you only pay by the year, so don't worry about it. Just write the check and be done with it. You're going to get that project. Ren will get into all the schools she applied to. Keeping life simple. You were never fancy, but you were authentic. And I think that's something that's missing in this world a lot today. There's a lack of authenticity. People recognize that and they gravitated to you. Showing up. You were always there in the good times and in the bad, and that mattered, knowing it'll all just play out just as it should, and most of the time it did. People matter. You always kept connections with those that were important to you. You cultivated a wonderful group of friends, North and South Side. We favored the South Side, what can we tell you? And that was a gift to treasure for your entire life. Breakfast was always your favorite meal, and it could be had anytime. 2 eggs over easy, 2 slices of rye toast, jelly, and coffee was a given. Of course, coffee consumption is genetic. I didn't realize it at the time, but I certainly understand it now. It's important to have things be right. Every day I worked at your office. It meant tabulating the receipts of the day. No room for error, down to the penny. You did it your way. At my wedding, our song was My Way. That applied to both of us, and your way was usually the right way. Treat people with dignity. Be as nice to the janitor as to the president of the company. Your acceptance of the choices that I made for my family and my life were never questioned. Love and kindness were always on the table, and your support was second to none. The day you brought home the GM motor bus, it was way before Lost in America. Michael touched on this as well. He pulled it up on Crandon Avenue. All the kids slept in the bus, and it was a small street. It wasn't, really tiny, and the bus took up the whole street. We rolled out of town, and when we crossed the Mississippi, the Monopoly game flew off the table. The adventures were always perfect when you were along. So now you are on your last trip. You are in a better place. You can now take long walks with Ira and Rolf. You can kibitz with Sanford. There will always be coffee, a macanudo, and sports will be 24/7. What else can you ask for, right? Rest in peace. I love you, Dad. As most of my friends and family know, my father was a man with incredible spirit and energy. I spoke so often of my father growing up. Often people asked if my mother was still alive. Dad, in so many ways, I have that same energy and spirit and feel so lucky that I do. As I reflect on my almost 65 years with him, I am reminded of so many ways his spirit passed not only to me, but also to my daughters, Rachel and Hannah, Lador Vador. My mom and dad showed me the importance of building a life with someone who shared your values, prioritized family, and built a Jewish home together. Dan and I often speak about how important this is. They modeled a life of leadership, philanthropy, and commitment to the state of Israel and the Jewish community. My dad walked the walk, whether when he was president of the synagogue during the Six-Day War or when he was one of the founders of the NIDA JCC in Flossmoor. He passed on to me the model of how to be a good parent. Dad helped me with every major life decision till I was almost 38 and married Dan. These decisions included where to go to college, when to leave Vail, whether to buy my condo, what kind of car I should purchase. I didn't always make parenting easy for he and Mom. Michael likes to think he was bad, but I was much more trouble. He managed to get me back into Camp Ramah after the head, Rabbi Cohn, kicked me out. At my rehearsal dinner, he said, "Ruth, you are no longer my problem. Now when you get a flat tire, there's Dan to handle it." Dad valued family over everything. He cherished our immediate family and devoted himself to spending as much time with each of us as he could. This extended to his cousins, his sister, his sister-in-law. This extended to his cousins, who he often called and maintained his role as the elder cousin Kenny. His most unique extended relationship was with my cousin Lloyd, who told me on his recent visit that he never knew a time in his life when Uncle Kenny wasn't there. Over the past number of years, our annual trips to Lake Powell gave me a window into their love. It's become a model for me to build an even more meaningful relationship with my nieces and nephews. Friendships old and new were essential to my dad. He taught me the importance of nurturing and maintaining those relationships throughout the long years. I was lucky to be introduced to two of my closest friends through our family and maintain those bonds in the same way my dad did with his childhood friends. There are so many people here today who I cherish because my dad taught me that was important. He and my mom welcomed my friends across many occasions. They always felt at home. Often my friends would ask if they could be adopted by my dad. I was struck this past week by the many people at the Carrington who felt that same way. My dad understood the importance of caregiving. As my mother's mother, Grandma Shirley, aged, she lived with my parents, and I saw firsthand how important this was. In the fall of 2017 and during COVID, Dan and I welcomed my parents into our home as it was modeled for me. Each morning, just as Dan was finishing his dishes, my dad would quietly enter the kitchen. It didn't matter the timing. Dan would happily make him scrambled eggs and bacon or a bagel with schmear. Dad, you taught me about kindness to people of all walks of life. The way that you treated the people who worked for you, the way you treated every person you met made an impact on me. So many people in my life have reflected on the impact you made on them just by being you. My mom and dad taught me to love Israel and the Jewish people. As my immediate family reflected this week on memories of my dad, there were so many key Jewish experiences we all shared together. One of the most meaningful was our 2012 trip to Israel for Hadassah's 100th anniversary. I will never forget the moment I stood with you, my dad, my mom, Dan, Rachel, and Hannah, singing Hatikvah, tears streaming down my face, knowing that I might never have a moment like this with you again. As we like to call you, Grandpa, no one could have been a better role model for how I want to be a grandparent in the future when the time comes. As you made the final decision to go into hospice last week, you said to me as we were talking, you know, we had a lot of good times together. Thank you, Dad, for all the good times, the life lessons about family, love of all people, and Judaism, which you inspire me to cherish and become part of my DNA, and I continue to share with my family. I will miss you and love you.
All right, so I'm Ryan. I'm one of the grandchildren, if you don't know me. So, all right, the oldest, yes. All right, so Grandpa, as the oldest grandchild, I had the privilege of knowing you the longest. You often referred to me as your number one grandson, even after our family had many grandchildren to boast about. We spent 7 years forming that unshakable bond. You were the consummate family man, always interested in what was going on in our lives. This was evident in the fact that everyone in your sphere knew us by our deeds and accomplishments, even if we had barely met them. You started many traditions in our family. The love of the University of Illinois, for one, from routine treks down I-57 for football games to the last Illinois basketball game we attended together just after COVID, a memory which I will cherish, where we beat Northwestern. So. You started a tradition of heading down to Champaign, which continued with my dad, my Aunt Lauren, and then to me and Connor. U of I is where I met the love of my life, and thanks to your passion that you passed on, I was caught up in Illini fever from the start. Illinois is where I chose to pursue medicine, thanks in no small part to your inspiration. We are connected in so many ways, but I cherish our connection to medicine. You in dentistry, me as a physician. You supported me as I studied for the MCAT at your house and slept over to have an easier ride to the test. I am proud to carry on the legacy of being Dr. Freedman, taking care of patients who are in need, as you often did in your van with the elderly and serving your community in the South Side. You were an ever-present role model in serving your community, and I love that you stayed there until retirement, treating members of the same family for decades. I hope I continue to make you proud every day serving my community. Lastly, I will miss your frequent ways with words. I will miss listening to your hybrid Chicago Jewish accent, the way you said tomato. The unique way you pronounced Hebrew words like the shehechiana, the kiyamana, the higiana, were all very unique. I will miss hearing you say, "Would I kid a kid?" whenever you said something factually suspicious. I will miss your somewhat indescribable grunts, the sounds. I will miss you hearing you asked to play ganip ganop ping pong in the basement of your home in Flossmoor, where I spent so many holidays with you and Grandma. I will miss the times in Vail diving for your Macanudo cigar caps in the pool. But most of all, I will miss being able to tell you all of this in person, how much you mean to me, how much I love you, as we did at countless birthday speeches and other events throughout the years, and as often as I could over the last 4 difficult weeks. So for my last speech to you, Grandpa, I love you, I will miss you every day, and I can't wait to see you again down the road.
I'm Jordan, one of the other grandsons. I guess if Ryan's the first, maybe that makes me the fairest. I want to thank you all for coming. It really means a lot to see all the people that came out here. I recently spent some time searching through all my old collections of photos, videos, and voicemails from Grandpa. The photos showed our frequent trips to Vail and Lake Powell, bringing up memories of sitting, playing hours of cribbage, him reading in his chair, him smoking a cigar by the pool, Connor and I making games out of the cigar cases to dive into the pool after them. As for the voicemails, I think about half of them were asking me to move a few guys around in his fantasy football lineup. Yes, the 95-year-old man could use the fantasy app on his smartphone. Lucky for me, not quite well enough to move players around when they had bye weeks, which meant I was guaranteed the Wednesday or Thursday night call to fix the lineup. There were 2 things strangely absent from my communication with Grandpa: no emails and almost 0 texts. My first thought was he missed the technology leap that brought about texting and email, going from faxes and landlines straight to the smartphone. Grandma would handle his emails, and I'm betting 1 or more of the texts coming from Grandpa actually came from Ruth. But then I was searching the internet for anything related to Grandpa. I came across an old paper he contributed to for an Iowa conference on geriatric medicine. Grandpa was the dental expert on the panel. In it, he described the interpersonal relationship between the dentist and the patient, and the importance of knowing the full individual patient history to provide the best care possible. Is the patient health overall deteriorating? What heart medications are they on? What physical limitations could they have for care? Grandpa cared extremely deeply about having a unique connection with people, whether it was his patients in the underserved area, his staff, his family, his grandchildren, the maintenance people in Vail, the hostess at his retirement home, dining area, or even the ER nurse that my father was talking about. It was obvious. Texting and email just wouldn't befit a man who prided himself on building such a special relationship and unique connection with other people. Grandpa, your endless positive support will be missed, the Wednesday, Thursday night phone calls, but I know that your legacy lives on through each of us here.
$479. This is the number of sporting events we estimate Grandpa attended, conservatively. If this does not convey to you how much he loved his grandchildren, then you've obviously never sat through a 4th grade soccer game or a 7th grade swim meet. My grandpa loved sports, but more importantly, he loved the connection that sports provided to his grandchildren. There was nothing better as a kid than looking up during a match and seeing your grandparents on the sideline cheering you on, as I was especially lucky to have my grandpa there for so many of my sporting events. Now, this may surprise you, but I did not receive any Division I offers when I was a kid, which clearly means Grandpa was no longer able to go to my games as I got older. Although I did think about inviting him to my Sunday basketball games, but the Chicago Men's Jewish League just doesn't muster the same excitement as a high school track meet. Despite the lack of in-person events, the connection between us and sports remains, albeit in a different way. As you probably heard, about 10 years ago, our family started a fantasy football league. Every year, Grandpa would order his physical copy of Sports Illustrated magazine and draft his team. Let me tell you, there is nothing more humbling than being beat in fantasy football by your 90-plus-year-old grandpa who can just barely set his lineup on his iPhone. Despite the devastating losses to him, I will forever cherish our weekly chat discussing the prior week's fantasy matchup. Sports was one of many things that my grandpa loved, and I will miss being able to experience the highs and lows of Chicago sports fandom and Illinois fandom with him. Grandpa, I love you very much, and if you're talking with the big guy, please convince him it's time the Bears win the Super Bowl.
So in 1976, Grandpa bought a condo in Vail, Colorado. At the time, people weren't sure if it was going to be a good investment or not. And while monetarily it's definitely been pretty good, the greatest return that Grandpa got from it was all the time that he managed to spend there with all of us and our family. I visited Vail with Grandpa every year from the time I was a little baby until almost high school. When I was a baby, he would take my sister and I for walks in our double stroller through town and pick up all the ladies there who thought we were so cute. And then when I was a toddler, he would take me on the bunny hill and I would ski between his legs. Then when I was older and I was in ski school, he would pick me up every day from ski school in his big brown coat, and he would take Hannah and I back up to the condo and help us take our boots off. I remember the first time I learned Grandpa wasn't going to come to Vail over winter break. I told my mom, Mom, who's going to take my boots off for me? I'm going to have to do it myself. When my sister was in 2nd grade, she tore her MCL on the first day of our ski trip, and she was very sad that she wasn't going to be able to ski for the rest of the trip. But she was also excited that she was able to spend every day with Grandpa and Grandma. And that was the trip that Grandpa first taught her how to play cribbage. And that was the start of a long, long history of many, many cribbage games between the three of us. Well, we've played many games with Grandpa over the years, from Old Maid to Hearts to Mahjong. Cribbage is probably one of our favorites. A couple weeks ago, Hannah got to play one last game of cribbage with Grandpa in the hospital, and in that last game, he skunked her, which, for those of you who don't know, means he beat her by many points. I will never get to play another game of cribbage with Grandpa, and I'm never going to take another trip to Vail with him, but I know that in the future, every time I play a round of cards or every day I spend in Vail, I'm going to think about him, and I hope to carry those legacies with me, hopefully in the future with my own family.
So it was always clear to me, and it's clearly been seen through all these speeches, how important it was for Grandpa to be involved in the Jewish community. He was very proud of being the president of his synagogue, and when he moved to the Carrington, one of the things that always brought him the most joy was organizing high holiday services and attending Friday night Kabbalat Shabbat. He always wanted to participate in things and go the extra mile. Once he asked me to help him learn a Torah portion so he could read Torah at his synagogue on Shabbat. But he didn't want to learn the official trope, so he memorized the entire portion using his own made-up sing-song melody. He especially loved the opportunity to share Jewish experiences with family. When Rachel and I were at Schechter going to Jewish day school, every time we had a ceremony, my memory is of Grandpa beaming in the front row. Whenever Rachel and I read Torah at our synagogue, he was so proud to watch and to tell everyone that we were his grandchildren. When Grandpa passed away, we had just done a special ceremony called Vidui, or confession, and said the Shema. And Grandpa passed surrounded by family after we prayed for him and told him how much we loved him. The meaningfulness of this moment reminded me of Grandpa's favorite prayer, which was the Shehecheyanu. And that's the prayer you say when you mark a special occasion and you thank God that you made it to that moment. That prayer exemplified Grandpa's attitude towards life. He always made the most of every situation, and he was grateful for every experience he had, especially the ones with his family. Every time I say the Shehecheyanu, I'll remember him, and I'll remember to follow his example.
Hi, I'm Ren. I'm also a grandchild. I would like to start by saying how much I appreciate everyone for being here today. Your presence is a testament to how deeply loved my grandfather is. He has always been the foundation of this family, instilling in us optimism, a love for travel and sports, generosity, and so much more. I think we are all incredibly grateful for that. So now I'd like to take a moment to say a few personal thank yous to my grandfather. Grandpa, I love you more than anything. Thank you for teaching me to always look on the brighter side of things, because I tend to not do that. Thank you for loving all of us unconditionally. Thank you for being so supportive of my mom and me. Thank you for sharing your love of sports with me, even though I still don't understand football. Thank you for always encouraging me to pursue what I want to do and for reminding me to not listen to anyone who doubts me, including myself. I know every time I call to share good news with you, you'd say, "See, I told you, I was right. Grandpa is always right." And you were. Your love was and still is unconditional. And finally, I just want to say that I love you to pieces. You have been the best grandfather a girl could ever ask for.
Please rise for the memorial prayer. אל מלא רחמים שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, לנשמת קלמן בן יהודה ודבורה, שהלך לעולמו, בעבור שאנו מתפללים בעד הזכרת נשמתו, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן. O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of thy presence among the holy and pure, who shine as the brightness of the firmament, unto the soul of Kenneth Allen Freedman, who is gone on to eternity. Lord of mercy, bring him under the cover of thy wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be God's possession, and may his repose be in peace. And let us all say, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at Jewish Oak Ridge Cemetery in Hillside, Illinois. The family will be returning to the Freedman Wander residence. Please note that information is on the service folder, as well as the information for Hadassah Chicago North Shore chapter for memorial contributions. For those of you who are joining us via live stream, that information can be found on the funeral home's website. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession to the cemetery, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing a car in the back of the procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. Please use your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. Please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to the cemetery. Just to give you an idea, we never really know about construction. We are going to be going on 294 South, then we'll go to 190 and then exit on Mannheim Road to get right to the cemetery. The following people have been asked to serve as pallbearers. When I call your name, please stand next to his casket. Ryan Freedman, Jordan Freedman, Connor Freedman, Rachel Wander, Dr. Hannah Silverman, Ren Habiby, Jessica Warchall, Kathy Leonard, Dan Wander, and Lloyd Lifton. This time I invite everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the casket of Kenneth Allen Freedman from the chapel. Then you may return to your cars.